Chapter 6, 700 Prisoners and a Handful of Actors. As 1954 began, Don Siegel had a 1-year-old son and a contract for a picture with Allied artists. Before the contract went into effect, Siegel agreed, at the request of Tom Tully, to direct a half-hour television pilot. The show was The Lineup, a detective series starring Tully and Walter Anderson, with Charles Bronson as the villain. The Lineup became the first of a series of television pilots directed by Don Siegel and later sold. 4 years later, Siegel would direct a feature based on the series, but of the pilot, Tully recalls, "There could never have been a series called The Lineup if it hadn't been for Don Siegel. It was his direction of the pilot that put us over. The Lineup was a radio series in San Francisco, a police series long before Jack Webb and Dragnet were even heard of. CBS finally decided to try The Lineup as a television pilot, but they were tight-fisted. They used the same cast that had been doing the radio series, and they tried to shoot it on one of the old videotape machines. It was a mess, and they decided to wash their hands of it. But when Dragnet succeeded, they pulled it back out again, and we got our team together. I went to the producer, Jamie Devall, and said I wanted Don Siegel to do the pilot. Jamie said he'd get his own director, that I should do my job as an actor and let him do his job as a producer. He finally gave in, and Don directed the pilot on film. I tried to get Don to stay with the show, but he wanted to do features. The show lasted 6 years and was often in the top 5 in ratings. If we'd had a man with intelligence like Don running it, we'd still be on the air." Then Don Siegel directed his first big hit, a picture that drew 2-page reviews in magazines and a 3-page picture spread in Look magazine. Among other things, Riot in Cell Block 11 broke 2 cardinal Hollywood rules. The good guys lost, and there were no women in the picture. Furthermore, the picture clearly had something to say about a serious subject, prison reform, and it spoke seriously, soberly, and above all, realistically. Filmed at Folsom Prison, the picture's cast included many convicts. The producer, Walter Wanger, and one of the leading actors, Leo Gordon, were both former convicts. And the leading actor, Neville Brand, in his first big part, seemed to have been created for the role. Wanger inculcated Siegel with penology books and took him to San Quentin, Alcatraz, and Folsom, where the picture was to be shot. The 2 men, with the approval of the California State Board of Correction, saw sections of prisons that ordinary visitors never see, including men in solitary confinement who should have been in mental institutions. By the time he was finished, Siegel had learned so much about the subject that he delivered a lecture on penology at Harvard Law School. When he shot the picture, Siegel used what he terms a documentary style. It was shot the way he and Wanger and the cast felt it would have happened. It was shot in Folsom Prison, and when the prisoners came storming angrily out of their cells, they were real prisoners. The cast was encouraged to feel their roles, and one of those relative unknowns was Leo Gordon, who had actually served several years in San Quentin for a serious offense. The warden didn't want Gordon in the picture. And though Siegel had originally wanted Jack Elam for the role, he and Wanger now felt strongly that a compromise on using Gordon would be a compromise on what the picture was to stand for. The warden finally gave in, but made Gordon enter a separate gate where he alone of the cast members was searched. "Leo Gordon was excellent in the picture," says Siegel. "He is a fine actor, as he proved again in Babyface Nelson. He is also an excellent writer. Gordon has written several screenplays, including Tobruk. Had he not been in the picture, it would surely have suffered." For several days while they were shooting, Siegel and his cast tried to conceal from the prisoners that they were planning to stage a riot. The 1 copy of the script, which remained in the prison, was kept locked in the warden's office. After the first week, prisoners began to approach Siegel, asking if they could play specific roles. It seemed that everybody in the prison had access to a script kept locked in the warden's safe. Siegel also remembers that Neville Brand seemed like a man possessed. He appeared to live the role. Asked what he now thinks about Riot in Cell Block 11 after the many pictures he has since directed, he answers, "I still think it is one of my best pictures, and a lot of the credit goes to the producer Walter Wanger and an amazing cast and crew, especially Neville Brand. Neville Brand is a lean, tough man with a gravelly voice. At 51, his experience has been massive. During his 10 years in the U.S. Army through the Second World War, he became the fourth most decorated soldier in U.S. history. He has been through bouts with alcohol and drugs, was at the top of Hollywood a few years ago with the Universal television series, Laredo, and near the bottom when he left it. He got fat and had trouble lining up work. His face is familiar from pictures including DOA, The Tin Star, Birdman of Alcatraz, and The Scarface Mob, in which he repeated the highly successful portrayal of Al Capone, which he originated for the Untouchables television series. Today, Neville Brand is back at work and in great demand. Wearing jeans and a blue short-sleeved shirt, he paced an office at Universal one morning talking earnestly and animatedly about Riot in Cell Block 11, Don Siegel, Hollywood, and acting. After a few days of shooting on Riot in Cell Block 11, my role became real for me, one of the easiest things I've ever done in my life. I felt that I was the boss of those cons, the whole prison. People have said that it was a tough part because of the emotional range, but it wasn't because it was real. I meant every word I said in the picture. I wasn't acting. I've never had that feeling about any other role I've played. It was the right role at the right time for me. I've cooled off now. If such a role came up now, I couldn't do it. I was one of the cons. I was so in it that I could feel it. We didn't know what we were going to run into each day, what would happen in that prison yard during the riot scenes. Those were spooky scenes. There were no actors there during the big riot scene. You had to be there to capture what happened as if you were in Vietnam with a camera, like a documentary. That picture really launched my career, really got me rolling in the business. Up until then, I was just struggling with little roles. It turned out to be a hell of a picture, made millions, won awards, paid nobody who worked on it much money, and was shot in 2.5 weeks. It's still a hell of a picture. I saw it on television a few years ago. It's so contemporary. Don, a non-violent man, is able to say strong things about violence in his pictures. After the picture came out, everyone thought it took 6 months to make. I went on a tour with it all over the East. I talked to the Yale drama class. It was wild. Spreads in Time and Newsweek. I didn't have the guts to tell people we shot it in 16 days. Don is like Peckinpah. They both dig violence and are two of the least violent guys I've ever met. It takes that kind of guy to understand violence. A violent guy doesn't understand. A man who has killer instinct in him, who has killed a lot of people, I killed a lot of people in the war, doesn't understand. I've worked all my life to channel the violence in me, to keep me out of the penitentiaries for God's sake. They pinned medals on me for it during the war, and since then I've had to channel it. Acting is a perfect channel for me, and the role doesn't have to be violent at all. Just the process, the expression of acting alone is enough. I've done a lot of comedy, and at the end of the day, I've been cool. Being in acting has saved my life, no doubt about it. My becoming an actor was accidental. I was in New York, living in the village, running around with a lot of veterans. It was right after the war, and for something to do, I enrolled in the American Theater on the GI Bill. There were a lot of actor studio people teaching there, being paid by the government. I started with them and got in the very beginning of Off-Broadway. I also did live television in the late 1940s, and it was a ball. No restrictions, hardly any sponsors. It will never happen again. It was the Renaissance in New York. That was the only creative period in the history of television. You could do anything you wanted. You could bomb and nobody cared. That's what you need when you're young. It's the only way to develop. A young man can't develop if he had to be good right from the start. Well, I was doing a Jean-Paul Sartre play when a Hollywood producer, Harry Popkin, who's dead now, saw me and gave me a role in an Edmund O'Brien picture, DOA. That was 1949. I played a homicidal guy, an inflammation of the brain psycho. For the next 2 or 3 years, I committed to Los Angeles to make films, and then I moved here. Plays got to be a bore. Film is more exciting to me. The last play I did was 5 or 6 years ago. I've worked with a lot of fine directors, like Billy Wilder and John Frankenheimer. They all have their different styles, ways of working. But Don's way is a ball, because he's on the actor's side. Some directors would just as soon kill you on the last day of a picture. Heartless guys like George Stevens, who's obsessed with making the damn film. Don talks like an actor, loves to be around them. He doesn't intellectualize or talk poetry. He gets involved in working with you. You get the feeling that he's not the director at all. He's in the scene with you. He's involved. He always says, we, not I, and asks, how do you want to do the scene? He gives no orders, and he can't, because he's involved, part of it. It's not a put-on. It's kicks. He is like a kid. He wants to be out there in front of the camera playing the game. This is one of Don's great qualities with actors, at least with me. You have fun. Tear loose. At the same time, you're aware that he's very sensitive. As an actor, your range with Don is tremendous. You can go from tearing up the place to tears. He lets you go. He did it with me anyway. He's one of the best directors I've ever worked for. I've only really worked with him on that one picture, although I did a television pilot he directed, Destry. Another thing that I remember about Don and Riot In Cell Block 11 is that we'd only shoot 1 or 2 takes, and that was it. I like a lot of rehearsal, but I do like to get it in the first shot when the camera is rolling, because I'm not going to get any better on the 3rd or 4th try. The first take is the freshest and most real. I like the way John Huston works. He will rehearse all night to get it in 1 take. Other directors don't rehearse at all, but shoot about 26 takes. I don't like to work that way. I like it when the camera captures things. And so does Don. He likes to capture things that happen instead of making them happen and then filming them. As far as acting for Siegel or anyone else is concerned, the only thing that really matters to me are the close-ups. An actor talks with his eyes. You must see his eyes in a movie to tell what he is feeling inside. All the rest is tricks. Anyone can break a cup to show how he's feeling. But for you to capture me, the way Don did in Riot In Cell Block 11, get my eyes, my face. All this fast cutting may win a lot of awards and make the actor money, but it's not his work. A hit doesn't mean shit to an actor if he's lousy in it.